Good evening, welcome to the Buck Stops here. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the program this evening, India and Pakistan have decided to restart the dialogue process. We are calling it a bilateral dialogue process. Essentially, it's the same composite dialogue process which has existed in the past. This was announced by the External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj a little while earlier on in Pakistan. The Foreign Secretaries of the two sides will now decide on the process and the schedule. As for cricket, because there was a huge sense of anticipation, the Pakistan Cricket Board Chief Shahryar has said that India doesn't want a bilateral series at the moment. On the show tonight, is this the right time to restart a dialogue process between India and Pakistan? Also on the program this evening, will single women drivers be exempt from the alternate day car use formula in Delhi that comes into effect from the 1st of January? Some fresh details are emerging. We'll also be joined by our newsmaker Rahul Bajaj, who says that as a socially conscious two-wheeler manufacturer, he needs to fully endorse the move of the Arvind Kejriwal government to cut down on air pollution. And finally, on what is clearly a packed show, a very special segment with Chennai's civilian heroes, people who didn't think twice before helping others during the floods. But let's go straight across now to Pakistan, to Islamabad. I'm joined by my colleague Amitabh Brevi. Amitabh, they're calling this a comprehensive bilateral dialogue. Just for clarity's sake, this is essentially the composite dialogue process. It's one and the same, right?
Well, that's what it seems like, because if you look at the 3 paragraphs of the joint statement there and the listing out of the topics that will be discussed, it seems like they are all the same subjects that were under the composite dialogue. It's a chilly night here, but it seems like the thaw in terms of dialogue at least restarting. They're calling it comprehensive dialogue. The NSAs will deal with terrorism. The foreign secretaries will decide on the modalities. And there was a comprehensive list of whether it's confidence building measures, terrorism, Jammu and Kashmir, Tulbur, Sir Creek, Siachen, even economic trade development. They had been delineated in terms of who would be discussing what in those groups. So it seems like, yes, it is on the surface at least the composite dialogue in a rehashed manner, but it is a big step in terms of dialogue restarting. Chilly day, as I said, chilly night here, but the thaw, it seems, has started.
Amitabh, there's an element of disappointment more than an element of cricket not being restarted, because a lot of people would be saying that if you're restarting the composite dialogue process, call it whatever you may, then surely cricket would have been a small thing to have gone ahead and done.
Well, it seems like that, and in fact, before the announcement and that short statement came out, and when that meeting was going on for a little over an hour between Sartaj Aziz and Sushma Swaraj, that's what we were also saying. We were saying it ain't over till, the fat lady sings. It ain't over in cricket even till the last ball is bowled. So in that sense, yes, but even talking to people in either the board, in the cricket board or experts, there seems to be a lot of financial dealings which have been taken into account, not just political ones as well, and the BCCI's relationship with the PCB and the ICC, etc., in terms of revenue.
Okay.
So not really certain as to why that hasn't started, but yes, on the ground, on the surface of it, it seems like a surprise. Why not cricket if you can start a comprehensive dialogue?
Amitabh, thanks very much for joining us from Islamabad. Also joining us now, former Air Vice Marshal Shehzad Chaudhry, the former Vice Chief of the Pakistan Air Force. Thank you, sir, very much for being with us. He joins us from Islamabad. From the BJP, Sambit Patra, former Foreign Secretary Kanwal Sibal also joins us. Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain, the former General Officer Commanding of the 15 Corps, with us in the studio. Tom Varakan of the Congress, and Sharda Ugra, Senior Editor, ESPN Cricinfo.com, will speak to us, no doubt, about that big disappointment about no announcement on cricket. We'll come to Sharda in a bit, but Air Vice Marshal Shehzad Chaudhry, let me ask you this. Do you see this as being a fundamental breakthrough? The composite dialogue process has been stalled now for quite some time. There was the optimism of something coming out of UFA. That never happened. And then the two leaders met in Paris. It was seen as a way forward. They met the NSAs in Bangkok. And now this. Are we headed in the right direction finally after years?
Surely, I think better sense has prevailed. I think India and Pakistan both need to justify to their 1.5 billion population as to what the two governments are doing in terms of ensuring that we head towards peace, we head towards development, we head towards joint cooperation, we head towards working towards the benefit of both nations. I think so in that sense it's a very promising restart, and I don't mind calling it a comprehensive or a composite or a resumed dialogue, as long as two sides are talking, there's dialogue on, and that is what is most important. I'm sure what has been holding us back will be resolved as soon as we begin to talk to each other.
Mr. Sibal, in UFA, India seemed quite happy about Kashmir not being on the agenda, at least not in the joint statement between the two sides. And then there was this intense back and forth when the Pakistani side finally said, no, look, there can be no substantial talks without Jammu and Kashmir being on the table. Well, Jammu and Kashmir is back on the table now. Is this a more pragmatic India as it approaches dialogue with Pakistan?
I don't think so. I don't reason it that way. I think UFA was agreed to in a specific context to deal with the immediate issues like the threat of terrorism, the violations along the ceasefire line, and therefore the BSF chief and the Rangers chief on Pakistan side and the two DGMOs meeting, etc., etc. And it was never ruled out that India will not talk about Jammu and Kashmir. But in the specific context of what was agreed in UFA, it was decided by both sides to focus on the immediate issues, which will then open the doors for discussing all the other issues, including Kashmir. But from the Pakistani side, there was a huge political problem, and they insisted not only on talking about Jammu and Kashmir, but also meeting the Hurriyat, with the result that that initiative received a setback. Now, my concern is that although one can say that India has shown flexibility and has decided to resume the dialogue. Incidentally, even earlier it was called the comprehensive dialogue. So there's nothing new in terms of this formulation. Yeah. But Pakistan, which has always said, both formally and informally, that India has no option but to return to dialogue with Pakistan, and now they've got what they wanted, in fact might actually mean that on the Pakistani side, maybe they may feel emboldened and encouraged to stand and hold on to their positions and wait for India to make the kind of concessions they expect, which India can't make. And therefore, I will remain rather skeptical about what may come at the end result of this process, though the fact that it has been initiative and we are trying once again to move things forward can be welcomed, but with great caution and great skepticism, and to my mind with almost near certainty that things will not happen the way we are expecting unless the root cause of the whole problem, which is terrorism, is not addressed. Mind you, Jammu and Kashmir is a long-term problem. We are not going to be able to solve this, but terrorism is a day-to-day threat to peace between India and Pakistan, and hence the insistence on the part of India that this issue must be addressed.
Let me just go back to Air Vice Marshal Shehzad Chaudhry for a quick comment on what Mr. Sibal had to say. Air Vice Marshal, for us it's always clear, we can talk about anything under the sun later on, but please deal with terrorism, and in many instances deal with terrorism specific to Jammu and Kashmir first. Is there a sense in Islamabad or an understanding that India will always want that to be the first position, the first round of important dialogue before anything else can be considered?
I think the fact that the NSS met first before the Foreign Minister came to Pakistan, even though for a Heart of Asia conference, I think indicates and stands to the testimony to the fact that both sides are open to any kind of discussion. More importantly, since Pakistan too has complaints about terrorism, and therefore it's important that both sides should sit together, whether it's to talk about Mumbai, whether it's to talk about terrorism in Balochistan or using the terrorists in Balochistan or whatever. I think those are the areas that the NSAs and the two sides need to get together on and discuss those. So it's perfectly fine. And terrorism is as much a part of our the list of issues that are going to be discussed, as been told or announced by the Indian Foreign Minister, which is good enough and which is welcomed. And I think there's a need for us to actually sit together and talk about Mumbai in a more structured manner, so that we can actually reach the conclusions and reach the essence of what went wrong, how did it go wrong, and what we could have done.
That's a very important statement, Air Vice Marshal, because they speak about that.
To ensure to ensure, to be able to ensure that it doesn't get repeated ever again.
The Indian side was assured, I'm reading from the joint statement, of the steps being taken to expedite the early conclusion of the Mumbai trial. That's there in this joint statement. General Hasnain, let me come to you. Speaking as a military man, somebody who served extensively in Jammu and Kashmir, ceasefire violations have been happening every week almost. There have been, what, above 100 in the, since UFA took place, so thereabouts. Isn't it strange that we should choose to extend this dialogue process with Pakistan now, when on the reality on the IB and the LOC is very different?
Well, I would say first of all that we should not close our minds to anything. If you want solutions, ultimately you have to speak. And I'm not speaking from any political point of view at all, purely as a professional. I would say there's a lot of misunderstanding on the line of control, a lot of misunderstanding on the international border. We have been having track 2 talks behind the scenes, and there's no problem in that at all, in just sitting across the table and talking about it. No decisions are coming around here. If we are going into this dialogue, we are primarily doing it for the purpose of searching for solutions. And I think searching for solutions can't be done without speaking to each other.
Okay. Sambit Patra, what do you believe has fundamentally changed since, what, just the last 1 week, 10 days, for India to actually go ahead and restart this composite dialogue process with Pakistan? Was it the 2 prime ministers who met in Paris, or do you really believe that the breakthrough took place in Bangkok?
I believe right from the very beginning, as far as this particular government is concerned, in India, I mean to say, it has been a consistent policy, and the policy has been to buy peace, to talk about tranquility, to see to it as to how the LOC has a better relationship between the 2 dispensations, and as to how terrorism is decreased. These are the points on which the government has been absolutely clear right from the day one, and that's why Mr. Nawaz Sharif was invited for the swearing-in ceremony. But down the line, when all this talk began, like the first talk was to begin with between the Foreign Secretaries. What went wrong was the conditionalities that were thrown upon India, the condition of meeting the Hurriyat, the condition that in fact Kashmir has to be brought in first for the discussion. I believe gradually, when terrorism became the most important agenda globally, and everyone realized that we have to come together to fight terrorism, and if I am reminded properly, the meeting between David Cameron and Mr. Nawaz Sharif, where Mr. Nawaz Sharif's statement that, well, yes, we have to come to a point where we have to drop conditionalities, we have to move into dialogue with India, was the point of thaw, was the point of change, from where things, I personally believe, changed or beginning to change. As far as the joint statement today is concerned, there is a segregation between terrorism and rest other issue. Terrorism has been segregated, as was the spirit of UFA, that first it has to be terrorism. And I was listening to Mr. Chaudhary also. Mr. Chaudhary rightly pointed out that well before any talks progress, the NSA's meet in Bangkok underlined the statement that it is terrorism which has to be addressed at first. That is the core agenda, and that was going on. Rightly pointed out yet again that Mumbai trial has to be expedited, and this has been mentioned in the joint statement. As far as the comprehensive dialogue is concerned, well, yes, the issue has been taken up, and I would say the modalities are being searched. Everything that were included under the comprehensive dialogue, in fact, we are looking into all that.
Yep.
But I would still say, let me wait for Sushma Swaraj ji to come to the parliament tomorrow and deliver upon the details before I delve on the issue.
In fact, she made that quite clear in that brief statement of hers in Pakistan, where she said that, look, I am bound by the fact that parliament is in session, and that she says she's bound to make a statement in parliament to clarify a lot of issues beyond this joint statement. Mr. Varakan, does the Congress party welcome this move by the BJP, by the government, to actually restart this process?
Well, nothing has changed actually. What has happened is there is a complete U-turn in the policy line. From UFA, what we saw was the ghost of UFA, in which we heard the NSA, who's been changed recently, that he said that unless Jammu and Kashmir is on the table, he would not travel to India. Then there was a change. The new NSA came in, and the NSA's position was, it was a military line, he was a military officer, and he took orders from the military. My concern is here, you have now taken the military onto the discussion table, But what my worry is, you should not give legitimacy to this rogue military establishment in Pakistan. What happens with that is that you give them legitimacy and you put caution out of circulation, and like the bus ride we had and followed with
You're talking
Kargil.
about General Juneja, the NSA over there in Bangkok, and the fact that Mr. Ajit Doval, our NSA, spoke to him. That you feel gives the military legitimacy. The military has always been a factor in Pakistan.
No, it's been a factor, but then by giving an official legitimacy to this establishment, for them it's business as usual. They may not start terrorism from the other side. They have the network already in India.
Okay, General Hasnain has a point to make, yes.
You see, the issue which I want to raise is, this is a very contentious issue which has been there in the agenda for very long. Should we speak to the military or not? Should we give them legitimacy or not? Will it compromise or dilute democracy in Pakistan? You see, now a time has come. First of all, General Janjua is no longer in the military. He's retired 2 months ago. He has commanded the 12th Corps at Quetta. He has been an ex-chief of staff. He's been a commandant of the NDU, considered to be a strategic mind. So I would call him not military, a quasi-military. And now making a outreach to him through the quasi-military as such, I think virtually we have started speaking to the decision makers.
Yes.
And earlier we were only speaking to the political authority, which really in Pakistan is not the decision maker.
Right.
So I think we've gone halfway, and that is, I think, acceptable in the moment.
Mr. Sibal, would you agree that rather than India talk directly to the Pakistani military, which could not really happen, the fact that their NSA is recently out of the military, that this is something that suits us?
Well, you know, I don't find this argument that since there is a military figure who is now NSA, therefore if we talked to him, we give legitimacy to the Pakistani armed forces. The Pakistani armed forces have all the legitimacy that they need in terms of the structures in Pakistan. Number one. Number two, this is not the only country which has had military figures at NSA. America has had it more than once. So I don't think that we are compromising anything by talking to the nominated appointee of the Pakistan government as the NSA. That is one. Number two, but there are 2 points I want to make. What earlier Air Marshal Shahzad said about terrorism. Now you can see, if you try and interpret what he's saying, is that we have complaints about you with regard to your terrorism, promotion of terrorism in Balochistan. Now we've been suffering at the hands of Pakistani terrorism ever since 1984, if not earlier. And Pakistan has not been talking about terrorism, which we have supposedly encouraging in Pakistan or being involved in. But now they have found this argument to try and deflect pressure on them on this issue by raising artificially this issue of India's involvement in terrorism, which does not bode well in terms of the talks that we plan to have on terrorism with them. Number three, if you look at the statement in Bangkok, the two NSAs discussed peace and security, Jammu and Kashmir, terrorism, and other issues, including violations on the line of control. So it's not as if terrorism got primacy of place, even in the talks in Bangkok. And that is where my worry is, that Pakistan may consider this as, once again, India not finding an answer to the challenges that Pakistan poses to us, and therefore returning to the dialogue process. And since their own position has become better in the recent months, with US, China and others supporting them fully, and of course recognizing their role in Afghanistan, and their general economic conditions having improved, I don't think they're in a mood to make any compromises. But that doesn't mean that we should not engage in this process which we have started. Let us test it out.
You're being cautious about the road that lies ahead.
Full rounds of the composite dialogue process without much result.
Okay, before I go back to my panelists, I want to go across to Sharda Ugra. She's been waiting very patiently, and both of us were waiting with the expectation that we'd get to see some good cricket between the two countries. Are you disappointed that that cricket hasn't happened this time around, that perhaps if we are taking, Sharda, such a big step in resuming this dialogue process, cricket is something that should have automatically been announced?
I was not expecting cricket to be announced. I mean, the only disappointment is that we waited all day for some piece of news to come about that series that's going to happen or is scheduled to happen between India and Pakistan. So I'm not surprised that it hasn't come, because, you know, mutual dialogue between India and Pakistan at a political level is far more important than a cricket series which is played or not. And cricket, like I keep saying, is the cheap currency that the countries sort of throw between each other to try and either foster goodwill or try and get political mileage independently.
Shadna, Pakistan seemed far more keen to play than us. Shahryar Khan was tweeting and he was speaking to reporters and others earlier on in the day saying that look, it's almost through, it's going to go ahead. And now he seems to have indicated that it's India which has said that look, we can't play cricket right now. Obviously India believes that cricket continues to be an important diplomatic tool. How does that sit with the cricket fraternity?
It's a strange diplomatic tool that gets used by both governments. I mean, no cricket will happen between India and Pakistan if the governments don't agree to the cricket happening. They can agree to talking to each other about everything, but the cricket happening has to be said so categorically. Whether it's happened in the back channel and it's going to be announced tomorrow, whether Shahryar Khan is going to get a bit of a surprise tomorrow, we don't know. But the discussions were going on all through the day. Nobody in the cricket establishment knew, on either side, knew exactly what was going on. The cricket team, the players were calling up people in the BCCI and saying, can we take our vacations or can't we? So there's that thing. Everyone's waiting for the government to give it the go-ahead.
Okay.
And it doesn't really matter whether it's the BJP or whether it's the Congress. People from both parties are invested in the cricket establishment. Despite what Mr. Anurag Thakur said today, there are people on both sides that are involved in this. So if the two countries do want there to be a little bit of goodwill, they can just pick up the phone tomorrow and say, yeah. The cricket is confidence building measure. It is people to people contact. It is, if you want to joke about it and say, okay, it's even religious tourism. You call cricket a religion and so on. So it could be anything. It could be tomorrow. I don't know whether anyone's going to say that it's not going to happen categorically. I don't think either India is going to say it's not going to happen categorically or the Pakistan board is going to say it's not going to happen categorically. They're going to keep pushing it as far as they possibly can.
So let's see what if there is an announcement. Samit, let me ask you this. Apart from Jammu and Kashmir, which remains such a contentious issue, and Siachen as well, there was this phrase called low-hanging fruit in terms of what India and Pakistan could actually take away from substantive talks. For example, Sir Creek is an issue where differences are much narrower than they were earlier on. Wular Barrage, the Tulbul navigation project, economic and commercial issues, humanitarian issues. Do you believe that there can be substantive progress in all of these areas as we debate Jammu and Kashmir, if at all we get around to doing that, these are the areas where we can see something major happening?
I'm sure. I mean, right now, if you look into the joint statement, you would see that the modalities are being worked out. And since the modalities are being worked out, we have to wait till the modalities are not worked out. Only then I would be able to answer as to what would be the pressure and what would be the kind of dialogue that would move into all this. But having said this, I just wanted a small bit of time for differing from what Mr. Kanwal Sibal said. Mr. Sibal said that he does not find the primacy of terrorism in the NSA talks that happen in Bangkok, because probably the joint statement which mentions Jammu and Kashmir is a trespass. I would not buy that argument. I would say, even if we read today's joint statement, which has segregated terrorism from the comprehensive talk, and today's statement categorically mentions that the NSA talks that took place in Bangkok categorically dealt only with terrorism. And I'm sure that means that if Jammu Kashmir was mentioned as point number 3 in the joint statement in Bangkok, that only means that aspects of terrorism and infiltration dealing with Jammu Kashmir were the issues which were discussed as agenda, and not the territorial issue of Jammu and Kashmir as such.
Mr. Barakan, you had a point to make, yes.
I wish and pray that what Dr. Patra is saying turns out to be true. But we are all skeptical of the whole issue. You have brought Jammu and Kashmir back into the discussion debate. Worrisome issues are there because the issue that they wanted has been achieved. What is the takeaway from there? What about the fugitives who have committed crime on Indian soil and are protected by the Pakistani authorities? These are the issues that have to come back. Yes, the foreign minister is going to speak in parliament. We appreciate that. But we have huge questions to ask, because you rolled back the entire thing. It's a complete U-turn from the line and policies you have adopted.
Okay,
Dr. Patra, I only had to say that everything positive happening for the country is good, but engaging them with is good. But caution should not be thrown to the wind, because we have
Okay,
heard
caution shouldn't be thrown to the wind. Samvit, we're running out of time on this. Quick reply to that from the Congress, and then we need to end this. Yes.
Be assured, caution would never be thrown out of the window. We will always be cautious as far as our talks with Pakistan is concerned, and our guiding line would surely be that we have to do away with terrorism. But having said that, a sincere rhetorical request to Mr. Tom Vadakam will be, tomorrow when Sushma Swaraj ji makes a statement, please don't cry vendetta or intolerance and vanish from the parliament.
Can we
be
listen
there
to
in
the
the
Foreign
parliament,
Minister tomorrow?
question, listen to
Without
her.
screaming and shouting in parliament.
Well, when vendetta has to be called vendetta, to be called in capitals, that's another issue. But yes, on foreign affairs, when the country is one, we will try to cooperate wherever cooperation is possible.
Okay.
But
Well,
let us see how things proceed
All
tomorrow.
right, well, let's hope that there is some peace in Parliament. One way or the other, we need to hear what the Foreign Minister has to say. I'd like to thank all of you very much for joining us this evening. The composite dialogue process resuming between India and Pakistan on all issues, including Jammu and Kashmir. What does this really mean in terms of progress between the two countries? Tomorrow in Parliament is when the External Affairs Minister is expected to make a larger statement. We're going to take a short break. Coming up after that, some fresh details are now emerging on how the Delhi government intends to enforce alternate day car use. Also a very special interview with Rahul Bajaj, who says that it is important for him to say, as a conscientious two-wheeler manufacturer, that please go ahead and support the Delhi government.